Welcome here to the webinar this week. I know that there's probably still a few people loading in and as we get started in this first minute here. So as you log in, I'll just do kind of a quick welcome for everybody. So welcome to the weekly Route Consultant webinar. For those of you who are here for the first time, my name is Josh Gregory. I am the director of the consulting team here at Route Consultant. For all of our regular attendees, welcome back. So just kind of to give an overview of what we're going to do today, if you're new here, we will spend the first 10 minutes or so at the beginning of this doing some teaching and kind of going over some content, and then we will jump into a dedicated Q&A at the end where we're going to be there to answer all of your questions, anything you have, whether it's related to the content today or anything else. We're going to try to get to as many as we possibly can. I know some of you are brand new to the space, looking to find out about the industry and if it's the right fit for you, while others of you are contractors who have been here a long time and are just trying to figure out the best way to optimize your business. Everybody's welcome here. We hope to teach you, give you as many best practices as we can from our experience in the space. Now, before I get started, I do have the boring part that I have to do here, just a quick disclaimer as we do every week. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. All that means for today is that we're not going to be sharing any materially non-public information, but we do hope that we give you some good and helpful information as we go through this. And my co-host today is going to be Annalee, who runs Route Consultant, and I'm sure is a very familiar face to anyone who's been on these before. I will bring her on in a little bit once we get into the content. A reminder for everybody that here at Route Consultant, if you've been here before, that we have a weekly tradition where you have to answer one of our questions before we answer yours. So the question of the week this week is, what is a unique or interesting fact about your state? About the state you live in. If you want to choose a different state, sure, as long as you bring a unique and interesting fact to the Q&A. Annalee and I will answer it later, but feel free as we're talking, as we're going over content, to go ahead and start to populate your questions into the chat. And just make sure you put it, sorry, not the chat, put it in the Q&A. If you put it in the chat box at the bottom, I'll miss it. So make sure you put it in the Q&A section at the bottom. And remember, type in the answer to our question and then type in your question, we'll answer it. Now, one last thing before we get into the content, just a quick update on our new inventory for the week. So we've got 4 new listings to talk about. So we've got one in Eastern New Jersey. It's 13 routes at $2.9 million. This has 3 managers, 13 spare trucks, a possibility that it's eligible for SBA financing as well. It's a full business with some assumable truck debt options and a few other options there as well. The next one we have is in Southern Nevada. It is 7 routes selling for $550,000. And there's a manager, 5 spare trucks. So really strong business with a bunch of options on the fleet side as well. And then the next one we have is in Northern North Carolina. This is 16 routes selling for $950,000 with 1 manager, 2 spare trucks. Again, might be eligible for SBA here as well. And there is some assumable truck debt on this. And it's mainly newer vehicles in that fleet. And then the last one we've got here is in Southwestern Virginia. So we've got 9 routes selling for $324,000, 2 managers, 2 spare trucks, and it's really high growth territory in that area. So those are the 4 new listings for the week. If you have any interest in any of those, reach out to the team or reach out to your consultant, and we will make sure to get you all the info that you need there. So now that I've kind of gone through the intro stuff, the admin things we got to go through, the next part here is we're going to go over a little bit of content today. So I'm going to bring on Annalee now, who's going to talk a little bit about Schedule L, which is, I'm sure, if you're a contractor, you've heard about, and if you're not a contractor, we want to make sure you hear about it. So Annalee, I'll kick it over to you and let you do kind of an overview here for everybody.
That's right. It's good to see you guys this week. It's been a couple weeks, and probably the first week you guys have seen me do a webinar sitting down, but I've learned baby Kate will be doing jujitsu if I try to stand up for this. So things are progressing well there. But yeah, I wanted to come on and talk a little bit about Schedule L. It's obviously a really hot topic in this space right now, and give you guys some updates. Still only a fraction of the overall contractor population has actually received their Schedule L. And so we're starting to learn more as we're seeing this roll in. Obviously a controversial topic. We can understand sort of the reasoning, the motivations there by FedEx Ground in terms of what's stimulating Schedule L is really just an effort to put additional emphasis on the importance of safety and deal with really mounting liability costs as FedEx is having to deal with these legal claims in kind of the public sector in terms of the number of accidents. And so that's definitely something where we can kind of see that piece. For contractors, it's been a very controversial topic for a number of reasons. We've obviously had contractors kind of heated or debated over whether there's, this is even legal to basically do a 36-month look back on accidents that have happened during, under prior contract terms, and also on accidents that contractors have already been charged for historically. So again, definitely a hot topic that we wanted to come in and address with you guys and kind of give you the latest information of what we have right now. And then we'll continue to keep you updated as we learn more. But basically, the design of Schedule L, and so just a quick overview of what even is it, is it's a new addendum to our operating agreement as contractors that basically assesses and classifies each contractor in a class 1 through 10 based on their safety performance and historic trend of occurrences. And we're going to define occurrences in just a moment. But it basically assesses each of us into a class based on our historic performance over the last 36 months of operations. And then based on what class we fall into, we will see either financial fines on our operating agreement or, potentially basically a neutral territory, or a potential financial bonus if we perform in a certain class on that safety rating. So let's talk about occurrences for just a minute, because that's obviously, again, kind of one of the other hot topic pieces is what defines an occurrence. There's still, I would say, some gray area and some debate with contractors of trying to figure out exactly what's going to count as an occurrence within that 36-month look back. Based on the information FedEx has released, it's easily defined as incidents that resulted in any paid claim or loss amount to FedEx Ground, right? And so the dollar amount does not matter as it pertains to these occurrences. It's just any claims that again have occurred where they're actually having to pay that out. And some of the why behind that too, from a claim perspective, it's not really again about the dollar value of the claim. It's frequency, and a lot of that, stimulates originates from the fact that typically from an insurance perspective, what we see is that frequency breeds, further incidents way more than severity of incidents. And this is something we've talked about for years, that the way to get yourself into hot water operationally or with your contract is not by having one really big accident, but instead a pattern of frequency with your accidents that typically, shows continued, probability of future incidents. And so that has bigger risk implications, both from a liability perspective, from an insurance claim perspective, and so on and so forth. And so that's really where you see some of that. So from an occurrence perspective, that's, what we're looking at. And again, there's going to be some debate on this in terms of kind of what classifies as an occurrence. One important piece of advice that I would give, all of our contractors that are here is, as this results and you basically receive what your classification is going to be for your contract, the first thing that, we would recommend is that you reach out to FedEx and immediately demand an outline of all the occurrences that are basically counting towards towards the tier that you are being classified into between those 1 to 10 tier classifications. And you basically want to review those occurrences in detail and make sure that there's legitimacy to those occurrences, because we all know sometimes those things that can get misreported, or there can be clerical errors and things like that. And you've got 30 days to contest any of those occurrences. So this is a really important piece and a really important step that we want you all to just note that that's going to be super important. Is as that gets released, make sure you dig in really quickly on what those occurrences are going to be, and that you take that opportunity to address anything that might be incorrectly attributed to your operation. So basically with the classes themselves, we're going to be class 1 through 10, and basically they're going to look back over that 36-month period at the number of occurrences per $1 million of revenue within our operation to basically calculate that rating. And so of those classes, in class 1 through 5, if you are class 1 through 5, that's where you've got exposure for potentially those financial fines. And so if you fall within those first 5 classes, you're going to be looking again at a significant potentially financial penalty and a fine on your contract. So basically the way that would work is you could be looking at anywhere at a class 5 of a 1% penalty, all the way down to at a class 1, a 3% fine on your, applied to your basically your total revenue. There's been a lot of debate, again, on how this is actually going to be calculated. And so the way that we've got it, based on the latest information we've received from FedEx, is essentially they're going to look back and review that 36 months, but they're going to look back over the prior quarter, essentially, and it's going to be applied to the previous quarter is how that's going to be paid out. And so basically, if you have a fine, what will happen is once they apply that, they're going to charge you weekly, starting the quarter immediately following the look back period. And then in the event that you're receiving a financial bonus, in that scenario, that what they've communicated so far is it's maybe a lump sum payment on that financial bonus. So we'll have to see how that plays out, but that's the information we have so far on those payments. But that's your class 1 through 5. It's basically, again, ranging from a 1 to a 3% potential penalty and fine there. If you are a class 6, that's basically the neutral tier, where it looks like there wouldn't potentially be any either fine or incentive on that one. And then it's when you're in class 7 through 10, in terms of your safety performance, that you have the potential for an incentive. And so that class 7 would start at a 0.5%, again, of that annual revenue applied to that percentage of your annual revenue, all the way up to class 10, where it's going to be as high as a 2% incentive on that revenue. So, for buyers, obviously, this is going to be a relevant question, and just trying to understand the safety history of the business that you're looking at as that application going forward. Again, you could see a financial reduction in the total revenue of that business with those fines, or you could see an additional incentive of additional revenue potentially with that business. Now, FedEx, they've stated publicly that there's basically going to be contractors that are falling in all of these different brackets, those that are receiving financial incentives, those that are not. Obviously, we're very interested to hear and kind of see from contractors, those that we're talking to, what brackets they're falling into. We would love to know kind of what percentage of contractors are falling into those different tiers, but we'll see. That information has not presently been released. So far, all the contractors we talked to, are falling into the class 1 through 5. So we've seen financial fines to the contractors that we've worked with so far. But we're, curious and looking forward to seeing how that plays out for the contractor base. So we'll continue to keep you posted as we learn more on that. So that's the other piece. The other piece I want to talk a little bit about is from an effective date perspective, what we're looking at timeline wise. So we started talking about Schedule L, much earlier this year in like February, and, where we stand now, the way that it's currently structured based on the information we've received from FedEx is that the Schedule L is going to go into effect the quarter after you've signed your new ISP agreement that has the Schedule L terms included. But again, it's a 36-month look back. So to those prior agreements. So you'll have to just kind of understand that timing wise. And then again, we talked about, basically the incentives or the fines being incurred the following quarter is when those would kick in based on that look back, right? So that's the timeline that you're dealing with. The other kind of couple other terms that we've seen a little bit on that is around, there's been some language that you have to have contracted that same CSA for the last 12 months before it goes into effect. So again, based on our interpretation of FedEx's language here, it looks like, for a new operator, you've basically got a period of time where you're going to be, kind of operating the business before that Schedule L kicks in. But again, that's just based on our interpretation of the language. We're going to have to see how that actually plays out with the first, handful of contractors that go in under these new Schedule L terms as these are rolling out. The other piece, that we would just kind of counsel you on is, obviously one of the first questions we're going to get is, well, how do I impact my tier? If I, let's say I am class 5 and, I'm 1 tier away from at least hitting neutral and not having a financial fine at that stage. So it's, again, a weighted average. So it's basically going to be based on, incurring fewer incidents as you work towards bringing that overall number down in terms of the number of occurrences that you've had. So, this is where we want to see you really invest in things like the new qual cert programs and making sure that you've got really good safety trainers on staff that are working with your teams in order to try to make sure that everybody's using really safe practices. As is always the case, whatever you can do to keep the drivers from backing up, right? That's ultimately the name of the game, is avoiding backing up, making sure that you've got the latest and greatest safety technology and that you're constantly being an early adopter and investing in the right safety tech for your fleets is, remains critically important in trying to control that. And then just, again, generally, coaching, also, I think managing your workforce, because again, as what we've said before is frequency tends to breed further accidents. And so making sure that you're really mindful of the staff that you have. I know we've all been there at times where you have a driver that, you don't want to get rid of, but maybe they've had a couple instances where they're, have had an accident or two. And what we typically see is that's breeding, significant probability that they're going to have continued accidents. So sometimes we have to make a separation, sooner rather than later there if we start to see a pattern of incidents. So really managing your staff and addressing that and not letting a problem child stick around for too long, because that can definitely snowball pretty quickly and then now have a significant financial impact on you. So those are kind of the big things I wanted to make sure we had a chance to cover. I had one other announcement I wanted to just go over as we're trying to keep you guys in the loop on the big changes happening, and then we can open it up and I'll tip it back to Josh and we'll go to Q&A. But from a My Ground Biz perspective, also wanted to give this update. We've had a lot of contractors asking about this, but there was a weekend update to My Ground Biz that just released. So they have made some updates to the layout of that page. Couple quick things on the redesign, and then just know that we're going to be putting together some trainings and further content for you guys just to better navigate and understand what you need to be working with there to stay up to date on the changes in My Ground Biz. But essentially there's been navigation changes where now they have homepage tiles that basically, act kind of like shortcuts to get there in order to navigate to different shortcut links. But there's a compass icon up at the top right that has all of your navigation details to be able to access that. But again, we're going to provide some further training for you guys on this. Also, the search feature seems to be an improvement for sure, based on historically the effectiveness of the search feature in My Ground Biz that we've probably all experienced. Now you've got, a lot more of your most commonly searched terms and items, which definitely is helpful in being able to see that part and have that work a little bit better. The search overall, again, just much more effective and really populates those recommendations. You just have to know what you're looking for, obviously, to be able to use that search function. You've got a favorites option now where you can basically add any page to your favorites that you want to bookmark and be able to access those. And then there's a clock icon on the left side that lets you access the recently visited pages that you've been to. and also a recently visited section in the compass navigation bar. But, we've again heard mixed reviews, right, where it can be a little harder to navigate now just because there's not a lot of information on that home screen. You've got pretty general information, so you've got to know your way around. But again, we're working on some help tools and some features for you guys that are, in there using it every day from an ops team perspective, but also from a contractor and administrative perspective to be able to navigate. So just wanted to let you guys know that had changed, and that we'll be providing, again, further training and updates on that as well. But those were the two big things we wanted to just make sure we talk about. And then I think we will go back to you, Josh, and I guess do some questions of the day and then open it up for general Q&A. So.
Yeah, thanks, Annalee. And I'm sure everybody's going to have questions. We'll try to anything specific on either of those that we can help with. Put it in the Q&A. We'll do our best to answer it. But as a reminder for everybody, for the Q&A, the question of the week is, what is a unique or interesting fact about your state? So make sure you answer that in the Q&A before we answer your question. I'll go first. Tennessee is my state. And we actually have the most visited house besides the White House, which is Graceland, which is Elvis's house down in Memphis, if you didn't know. It's worth visiting, but yeah, behind the White House, we're number one.
That's a good one. Honestly, I'm trying to think, everybody kind of already knows this, so I guess it's not that interesting, but I feel like a fun fact interesting about Tennessee is that this is just me revealing myself, and probably the fact that I'm staring down the barrel because it's been so long, but I've got my Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey right here that sits on my shelf. So if you don't know that Jack Daniel's is Tennessee whiskey, that would be my play. Very soon, this little baby girl is going to come out, so Mama can have some Tennessee whiskey again. But for now, it just sits there and keeps me company and reminds me of my roots here in Tennessee. But that's like the best one I can come up with. But Graceland, that's a good fun fact, Josh. So
yeah, Jack Daniel's is also, for a long time, I think it wasn't until like 2009 that there were only like 2 counties in Tennessee that could make any liquor, any spirited alcohol. So Jack Daniel's had it was one of the 2 counties that were allowed to do it until literally 10 years ago. It's ridiculous, but yeah.
And I'm not surprised you know that. And so fun fact about Josh, everybody, is Josh, I can tell you for a fact, is someone that you want to take to trivia night with you. Not me. I would be terrible unless it's like movies. I can usually do the movies or maybe songs, but Josh is definitely a viable contender on a trivia team. So I am not surprised you know that, Josh.
Hey, you need movies and songs, people, just as much as you need random facts. It's
right. Random facts. You got sports. You got all the good. But,
all right. Well, we're going to jump into the Q&A now. And remember, if I see at least one question in here where you didn't answer our question, so make sure you pop that in before I answer yours. First one here is from Gary. So he said, Colorado has the best year-round recreational activities. I'd say that's probably true. It's I'm sure they're also one of those where they convert the mountains into biking trails in the months when there's not skiing, which I still think is so cool. And I got to do that sometime. But I think a first kind of side question is a part of it. Does Schedule L apply to line haul? Do you know that?
Yes, Schedule L is going to be applicable for line haul operators too, as far as we've been communicated. So yes, that'd be the first part of that.
And then the second part is, does he start over with his own, or does he move forward with the seller's current when he takes over? And I can jump in and do this too, yeah. But yeah, as far as we know, from what FedEx has said, when you take over a new territory and have your own new contract, then it will be basically a reset where if it's not a stock sale is maybe a different story if you're taking over the actual entity and not a new contract. But if you're doing an asset purchase agreement and it's basically a new contract and a new name, and for you, it should be that you reset, and you won't have any kind of payment or incentive here until you've operated for 12 months. And then that'll start your look back period.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Next one is, all we've got is a last name here, and I'm going to butcher it, but Egebrecht is the last name. Who knows if I'm right or not.
I feel like it's Tom. I feel like it's Thomas, but maybe I feel like that's your middle initial and it just didn't say Tom today, but I might be wrong, Tom. If it is, I feel like you're a repeat offender. So
well, his fact is Arizona, you can ski in the morning, golf in the afternoon, and that is a Great. That sounds
Oh,
like, yeah.
wait,
Um,
that's such a good state fact. What?
yeah.
Wait, is that real? I feel like I've been to Arizona and I'm trying to think of like where you ski in Arizona. I think of it as more of a dry.
Yeah, I believe I
Okay.
know.
I'm
Yeah.
impressed. That's like you've piqued my interest. There might be a future road show in Arizona, you guys
Yeah.
coming your way because now you have my attention.
Uh, so his question is, whether it's the fine or the incentive, it's a percentage of what, and is all the income generated to FedEx being paid out to contractors? So I think just a simple overview of kind of how the revenue is calculated, because it is a little bit confusing, so whatever the look back period, the most it'll be is 36 months. But if you haven't operated for 36 months, they won't look back. They'll just look back as long as you've operated. And the minimum is 12 months. And they'll look back over that entire revenue period, and they will look at how many occurrences you have per $1 million. And so it's an aggregate, a total of all of the revenue you've generated. And then basically when they're actually calculating your size or the amount of revenue that you're going to be paying a percentage of, they're only looking at the most recent quarter. So to get your classification, they're looking at the full look back period. But when they're kind of deciding how much you're going to be paid or how much you're going to pay, it's looking at the most recent quarter and then taking a percentage of the revenue. And an important little note there is that it's all of the revenue on the contract except for the fuel surcharge. That's not a part of the calculated revenue. So other than that, they're going to be looking at the most recent quarter, and based on your tier, you'll pay or be paid a percentage of that revenue.
That's right.
Next one is from Nicole. She said she didn't hear the question, so I'll let you have a follow-up, Nicole. It's a fun fact about your state, or an interesting fact about your state. Do we plan on having any kind of attorney look at Schedule L or any kind of thing there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I saw she was asking about TALP on that one. So I'm not speaking for TALP. TALP's had their first two kickoff calls. So hopefully we'll hear some industry updates from them here shortly on just some of those initial conversations. So I'm not speaking specifically for TALP, but definitely I know of a number of contractors that are already having, Schedule L reviewed and looking into that. So I certainly imagine we will hear, further announcements and kind of thoughts and feedback on that. But it's definitely been a really hot topic of debate. I've heard a lot of contractors questioning the legitimacy of Schedule L, but nothing definitive that I've heard on that yet. But I imagine you guys will hear more for that.
Yep, perfect. Next one here from Michael. So his fact is Minnesota's the state. People only think about the cold weather when they're coming from there, but it's also the birthplace of the medical device invention, with the first pacemaker being developed there. Medtronic. I am familiar with Medtronic.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then his question is, he's a prospective contractor, wondering about day-to-day management activities, and basically trying to figure out if it's a viable option, and figuring out his balance of maintaining his current job versus having to manage full-time versus a manager, and kind of how much does he need to be on site and in the office? What does the office even refer to in this industry?
Yeah, it's a lot of really great questions there, Michael, in terms of trying to, figure out the right piece. A couple things, I was just covering this in one of our new investor summits yesterday. So a couple things that I would encourage you to consider there. Piece number one is some of it is impacted by the nature of what your, other job is and kind of what your other role is, and in terms of flexibility. So, one of the things I try to counsel people on too is like, just whether you were buying a FedEx business or any other type of small business, right? The privilege and the joy of being an entrepreneur is that you can oftentimes build your business in such a way where it doesn't require a lot of your time. You can delegate, you can put the right management structures in place. You can build these businesses to be relatively low time investment from a management perspective. But the fun part about being an entrepreneur and owning your own business is that when the business needs you, the business needs you. And there's usually little warning or headwind for that. Sometimes we just have a crisis or something where at the end of the day, nobody cares as much as we do about our own business. And so I think the flexibility is always a really important thing to consider with that you can absolutely build these businesses. And, I know lots of operators that run these businesses from, 5+ hours away from where they even live. So they're certainly not there every day. But the issue is that you just have to know that if something goes wrong where the business needs you, you want to have that flexibility that you could show up and solve a problem and jump in and triage. So that's a really important piece. There's really not an office setting at the terminal. And so for most operators, we have BCs or operations managers that go to the terminal every day and dispatch our trucks and, manage the day-to-day with our drivers and get everybody on the road. And then they might work from a conference room, or they might go home and work from home, or they might be out on a route, triaging and dealing with different things, working from a vehicle. But a lot of times for the owners, we're working more from a home office type structure. And again, that depends on, whether we're outsourcing things like payroll processing and recruiting and administrative functions, or whether we're handling those pieces ourselves. Is every contractor does that just a little bit differently. But that's really what's going to determine kind of, again, how willing you are to outsource and delegate things. And again, that's typically a function of how much profitability are you willing to forego in order to have the business run a little less hands-on. But at the end of the day, these are not designed to be absentee passive investment streams, right? These are very much dynamic, needy businesses that, even though we're just taking cardboard from point A to point B, it's not that hard. It's not rocket science. There's a lot of, moving pieces in a given day. And so you want to have that availability, or at least have someone that is going to have that dedicated availability to be able to solve those problems. And typically a BC is not an all-in-one solve and solution for that in any way, shape, or form, typically. So I would say you want to go into it with that balance. If you've got the flexibility, you can absolutely do it. And if you're willing to forego some of the profitability, you can make it less intensive. Now, something I'm really firm on is being there for at least the first 2 to 4 weeks. I think is 2 weeks is minimum, imperative that you're on site for those first 2 weeks, because you want to ride along with your drivers. You want to get to know your manager. You want to get to know the other contractors in the building, your terminal staff. You need to build those relationships and really understand the inner workings of the business. And really that first 2 to probably 4, at most 6 weeks, those are when it's the hardest, because you're learning everything for the first time. And it is absolutely like drinking from a fire hose. It's that first 2 to 6 weeks where our clients always call and go, oh my God, this is insane. What did I do? And then by 6 weeks, they're like, okay, this isn't so bad. I think I have it figured out now. But it's really important that you're able to dedicate that initial upfront time. And I think that also positions you to potentially be able, to outsource and delegate more things once you really understand the business. So
yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, and especially if you're buying right now, it's even more important to be a little a little more invested in the day-to-day as we head into peak season.
That's right.
All right, next one here is from Brenda. Her fact is that North Carolina has the largest privately owned home in the U.S.
You guys are so good at this. I feel like I've kind of underrepresented Tennessee by how fun fact you guys are.
Well, and the Biltmore is a place you can still stay. It's beautiful. If you haven't been there and you live close by, it's worth visiting. So question is, so we're selling 70% of our company. Will our look back be for the entire company or only for the part we retain? So this is a little bit of a tricky one where they leave themselves some wiggle room, where basically the letter of the law, as they've put it, is that if the CSA ID does not change, even if you have sold off zip codes, then it'll have the same look back period. And so if the CSA ID doesn't change at all in the new contract, which I would expect it would, but if for some reason that didn't change, you'd have the same look back period, but the next time they looked at it, your revenue would have decreased. So it's likely that your class will change as well, but that's basically how they've said it so far. But if your CSA ID does change, then you'll reset and it will not apply until you've operated that new CSA for 12 months. So it's going to be a little bit dependent on how that transition happens, but I would expect you would end up with a new CSA ID, but there may be situations where you don't.
Yeah, this is definitely some of the nuances that, we're going to see how some of these things play out for sure.
Yeah, you'll see if you go through it where there's basically some gray areas where they say, this is definitely how it works, except maybe if things are a little bit different, or maybe in certain circumstances, we'll leave a door open for it to work a little bit differently. So we'll see how that plays out. Okay, next one is from John Schultz. And his question is, or his answer is a great one. He's in Tennessee as well. And his fun fact is that there's no state income tax. And it is a very fun fact. It's one of the best facts about Tennessee. So John says, how are we going to know how many incidents we have? There's plenty of bogus claims that we may not hear about until it's too late. So is there going to be some kind of report from FedEx?
Yeah. So that was what I was saying towards the beginning. That's really important, is as soon as you get your Schedule L notification, the first thing you need to do is legitimately go to the terminal and demand a list of what occurrences are counting towards your class code. So getting that specific list of occurrences is critical, and you've got 30 days to contest those occurrences that are impacting that class code. And that's your chance to basically sift through the legitimacy of those and contest those, which that would be my first priority move there.
Yeah. So I think from what I've heard, you get an email with the list of it, but it's not going to be detailed until you ask for it. So exactly like Annalee's saying, ask for details and then try to dispute it as much as you can if there's anything you're not aware of. Okay, next one is from Tim Brown. His fun fact starts as a question. Let's see if Annalee can get it. 3,500 miles of coastline. What state is this?
3,500. That's a lot of coastline.
I'll say I didn't know.
I don't know. I mean, I'm like, Florida has a lot of coastline. Texas has a lot of coastline. California has a lot of coastline. The Northeast is a little questionable for me. Yeah. Like, they're little states, but what's that? What's the top one? I'm so bad with the
top one is the answer. So it's Maine.
Is that it?
It is it. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like I get like 50-50 credit for that, because I was like the top one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a lot of credit. I think you identified the right state. I would have guessed Florida, so you win. It's equivalent
to that on baby brain, so we're gonna be like,
incredible. It's double credit. Yeah. So Tim's question is, if he purchased it 2 years ago, are they still going back 36 months? And no, it's basically 36 is the farthest they'll go, but if you haven't owned it for 36 months, they'll just go back as far as you had it. So 2 years, they'll go back however far that is. Yeah. All right. So next one from Logan. So first, his answer is, whenever you're in Florida, you're never more than 60 miles from the nearest body of water. And that's also great. I wish I could say the same thing about Tennessee, but Tennessee is one of those suspect states where you get fresh seafood and you wonder where it came from. There's no water anywhere nearby outside of a lake.
Yeah. I'm also like, with Florida, is that like for sure 60? Is that ocean to ocean, or are we talking swamps? Like, does a swamp count?
That's a great question. Yeah. I guess it still counts as water. Yeah. So his question is, if you have multiple entities, is it going to be all for one, or is it split off? And they have said that they're going to look at this separately per entity. So you'll have a different class and a different revenue review for each of your separate entities. So as long as they're separate, they'll be different. And then it's really per each contract, actually. So even if you have one entity with multiple contracts, they're looking at this at the contract level.
Yeah. And this is where, and this may be one of the few situations that sort of starts to change the narrative on this a little, but we've always talked about the importance of kind of diversifying and, not having all your eggs in one basket. But, this is going to be one of those where, based on your scale and magnitude, right, the number of occurrences, the larger the business, the more the occurrences, obviously the larger the impact there. But something just to be mindful of, that you're going to have some contracts that might have great performance, and then others that struggle. So that it's going to be something to watch. But typically, again, that diversification, at least like with anything, if you can diversify the risk a little bit, you spread that out. So
yeah, that's right. All right, next one here is from Jana. South Carolina is home to Darius Rucker, John Mellencamp, Chris Rock, and Bill Murray, among others. So some great celebrities there.
apparently funny people like to live there.
Yeah. Yeah. So this one, I'm going to ask it. I think there's only so much we can say on it, but basically, how is it even that though our contracts are renewed yearly, how can they look back 3 years across multiple contracts? And is this a follow-up question around legality? Not going to comment on the legality of it, but that's basically how they've said it so far, is that since it's the same CSA, they will look back across multiple contracts. That is what they're doing. Not going to say anything about whether they can or can't, but that is how it's written right now.
That's the specification that most contractors that we're talking to are obviously the most questioning of the legality of, is the fact that it does extend outside of those prior operating agreements. So it's, we'll see what happens with that, but.
And then we've got a follow-up from Tom, who did confirm that it was Tom. So do all fines being paid by the contractors in classes 1 through 5, are they paid as bonuses to the contractors in the high tiers, or is this a new profit center for FedEx? They would never call it. So basically what he's saying is, are the people in the low tiers, is what they're paying to FedEx, is that going to the contractors in the high tiers? That's not going to be how FedEx sorts it. And really what FedEx would probably say is that this is covering an expense that they've been bearing and it's gotten too large. So this is offsetting an expense. So, I don't know how they've got it worked out on the back end, what money goes where, but that's kind of their rationale, at least.
Yeah. And again, I see kind of where Josh is going on the profit center piece. I think at a minimum, I mean, you've got a fine exceeding up to 3% and an incentive, leveling out at 2. So you've got some automatic, hedge there. But I think, it's also, and this gets back to what we were talking about at the beginning, FedEx has stated publicly that there will be contractors, all across the spectrum there in the different brackets. And so some that will receive incentives, some that will receive penalties. What would be, again, super interesting to find out is what percentage of the contractor base is falling in each of these different classes. And so that's, something that will start to reveal itself over time. But I would suspect, just based on the conversations that we're having and, the contractors that we interact with, that, the vast majority of contractors are likely to be falling on the financial fine side, as opposed to the incentive, just again, based on the feedback that we're receiving from contractors. So that would start to skew, that kind of break even concept that you're talking about there, Tom. But, we'll learn more about that as things progress and as more and more contractors start receiving their Schedule L. So again, from that perspective, I would suspect it's, going to be a quote unquote profit center, but, as Josh is alluding to, this is an attempt at basically recouping the costs that FedEx has been allocating. However, again, there's the other hot topics the contractors are debating, right, is that, we've already, in a lot of these instances in a 36-month look back, we've already incurred costs, for these, these occurrences, and sometimes they've already paid for these occurrences. And so there's a lot of hot topic debate on that subject. So.
Yeah. And then we do have a follow-up in the chat, just a quick plug, like Annalee and I are not on TALP, but there is a plug in the chat just to let you guys know that there has been, they have met twice. It's going really well. There's lots of great ideas being floated and discussed. So there is at least an update there. It's not coming from us. It's coming from somebody who's actually on it. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for that update.
All right. So this one's from Michael Madden. So his fact, Jersey Shore TV show is not at all indicative of the beach towns of New Jersey. Well, maybe one.
Well, maybe one.
Good to know, Mike. Oh, man. So his question is, can BCs do pre-trips for drivers? And then how do you find out about scale requirements at a terminal?
That's a really good question. We need Jesse to come back. He was literally on here at the beginning. Jesse is our operations manager that ran all of our businesses. I don't know that I've ever been asked that question, Michael, that if the BC, I don't see any reason why a BC couldn't do the pre-trip. So I imagine the BC can do the pre-trip as long as a pre-trip is completed. But specifically, I've never been asked that, but I'm pretty sure that you can.
Yeah, that would be my assumption, is that they can, even though
I'm gonna check that because I'm so curious. It's so rare to get one that it's like, wow, no one's ever asked me that before. That's a good question, Michael.
Yeah. Oh, and then the scale question, Mike, basically you will just need to talk to the terminal, unfortunately. Every terminal is going to have a little bit different scale limit, and they do change all the time. So it is something where basically a conversation with the terminal manager, senior manager can give you at least a sense. Sometimes they don't even know, but it is worth, that's who I would start with, is asking if they know what the scale limit is at the terminal. It's not going to be something that we can just tell you matter of factly by region or based on the size of the terminal.
Yeah, the terminal manager can definitely find out, but they're going to be the validation point there. Because as Josh said, it's changing. It would be so great if we just had a master database of all the terminal scale, but they do change, and that is something that's so inconsistent terminal to terminal. On average, like your larger, more dense terminals, we can see it be low as like 3 to 5%. And on typically like the high end is like 12 to 15%. But I mean, every once in a while we'll see a terminal, that might be really, really rural, where you can be like 20% of the terminal, because that's still like 5 routes. So that's the level of variation that we typically see. I'd say average is usually about 6 to 8% in most buildings at this point, but that's kind of, gives you some ranges there at least to work with.
Yep, perfect. All right, next one here is from Andy, which is with a great state fact coming in. In Charlottesville, Virginia, we have the only courthouse where 3 presidents practiced law: Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe. So that's great. That's trivia I will file away, Andy. So he's basically saying, isn't it better to be larger here, as well as 36 months versus 12 months? I think I'd say the classifications around revenue are designed to basically say, if you're bigger, you'll be running more trucks and more routes. So it'll lessen the impact of each individual occurrence. In a way, a longer period of time can be better. 36 months, the idea is it will average out and start to kind of help you out. But the problem is just when people are thinking about if there was a period of time that was worse, that was a long time ago, and it's still affecting them now, like, 3 years ago, if there was a really rough period of time for about 3 months, and that's having a big impact on what they're seeing right now, that's how you can feel it, and kind of be not excited about a long period look back. On the whole, though, that the idea is that it'll help you average out over time. At least that's the way it's designed, is the idea of it.
Also, I got confirmation we're wrong, Josh. The driver has to do it for DOT, since they're the ones like held responsible, basically. So I had to look that up too. But no, it actually has to be the driver. BC can't do the pre-trip.
Well, we got it there. Therefore,
like really crazy good first one. I can't believe I've never been asked that, but.
Yeah, here's a quick one from.
Also, I don't know why. I guess your BC would do it for the driver, but maybe you have a really nice BC, Michael.
Yeah. A quick one from Uli, and he didn't answer the question, so that's why I put off answering yours, but just saying. So is there a detailed schedule that shows how many occurrences per 1 million drops you into which category? There is. It's on MyGroundBiz. If for some reason you can't find it, just reach out to us and we can send it to you. All right. This is a tough one. Let's see how you answer it, Annalee. So from Zach. So his question is, I'm from Florida. An interesting fact about Florida is that it has the most golf courses in America. It would explain why my father-in-law loves Florida so much. That is his #1 remaining activity, and now that he's retired. Yeah. So he's looking to get into the space, and he's just kind of rationalize and think about the fact that you only have one customer. So how do you get comfortable with the fact that it's only one customer, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, one customer, that's always been kind of a hot topic for debate in this space, and this is a great one to kind of wrap up on too, just because it's again kind of always been a hot topic, or not really a hot topic, but a frequently asked question, I guess. So a couple different pieces there. There's there's two parts to it, right? So from a FedEx perspective, and obviously you're talking about a substantial player, in the e-commerce and in the last mile delivery space. So if you're going to have one, it's a pretty good one to have from a reliability standpoint. The risk there is that it is one customer, right? And so if something, changes with that one customer, it completely obliterates your business, outside of the vehicular assets that you have. Things that we've kind of seen be relevant with that in the past is the counterpoint to that, right, is that one customer is incredibly reliable on, settlement revenue. So you don't have accounts receivable. You're not having to chase down those weekly pay stubs. You're not having to keep up with, again, those accounts receivable, which you're not having to deal with sales and marketing and a lot of those other challenges that we face when we're in other business units, right, where we're having to source those customers. You do have some element of diversification in the fact that FedEx as that one customer is in fact comprised by a lot of customers, right? That, if one carrier that's shipping through FedEx goes out of business, typically there's a million more, mom and pop, distributors of some kind or shippers that basically can recoup that. And so you get a little bit of diversification that way, just because that one customer's basis is actually a lot of customers, but there's no denying you have one customer. And so that's definitely always something to consider from a diversification perspective. That's what we see a lot of operators that are Amazon contractors, and then, they're FedEx P&D contractors and they're FedEx line haul contractors. And, maybe they also have their own DOT number and they're, running third-party freight. So there's ways to diversify and still get the economies of scale and the synergy. And again, one of the things that I've seen is oftentimes people use FedEx as really that stable building block to build an operating portfolio because of the consistency and the reliability of the revenue. You can build a portfolio on the backs of that reliability and then expand out and diversify, into other pieces.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I think it's stable business partner that in the past, like they're huge. Obviously, FedEx is if there's anybody you're going to link to. And then, we see people all the time who start with FedEx, get into Amazon or vice versa. So very common strategies there. We can help out if you have any more questions on that. But for everybody else, I'm sure, there's going to be more questions on Schedule L in these next few weeks and other things as we head into peak. So feel free to reach out into the team as we get updates, and as we find out anything more, we'll make sure to bring it to all of you as well. But we would love to hear as you get those Schedule L, find out those classifications, just so we can start to figure out how many are in each tier. And on the other piece of things, if you're in Migrant Biz and can't find something and are trying to figure out where something is, and we're trying to start to consolidate that in a way where we can make it easy for everybody. So if you see something like that, let us know there too. Other than that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up for today. And thanks everybody for coming out. Thanks, Annalee, for presenting on that. And we will see you all next time.
All right. Bye, everyone.